Well, Taj Pabari, thank you so much for being involved in this series of videos where we're having conversations about how to take this country forward after coronavirus economically. We've seen huge impacts in terms of the lockdown, and we've seen businesses really being smashed. But we want to get some ideas going and get that debate going about how we really do come out of this as strong as we possibly can. And so I'm really thrilled that you're with us today. For the explanation of your sort of appropriate role in this whole series, I think you for me epitomise the young entrepreneur. I mean, you've been a Young Australian of the Year at the youngest ever age. I think was it 18 years old, or Queensland Young Australian of the Year. But that's good enough for me. And you formed your own company, Fiftysix Creations. You've been a young entrepreneur, and you've also received a whole lot of other acclaim in other areas and awards and recognition and support. So enough of me babbling on. How about you tell us all about Fiftysix Creations and how you came to set it up and what you're trying to achieve?
Absolutely. Well, no, thanks for having me, Campbell. I think my journey started back when I was 14 years old. I went to school in Logan, Queensland, and just growing up, I didn't enjoy being in the classroom, was incredibly frustrated. I was always just doing every other thing except focusing on just the standard classroom. I was fascinated by technology. I was fascinated by the internet, and kind of got into business quite young. So started my first tech blog when I was 11, and then started Fiftysix Creations, which is my current social enterprise, at the age of 14. And around that age, I think I had 3 or 4 suspensions. I was on probation that year at school. So it was one more, and that's expulsion. And kind of just, to me, the idea of business and entrepreneurship was fascinating. I was immersed in numbers. It got me excited. I wasn't very good at maths or English or any of the subjects at school, but to me, just reading and researching and just scrolling the web was literally my hobby. It was something I loved. I was learning new things, and kind of just stumbled into business as a result of me having the problem of not being able to start a business. I didn't know how to start a business at the age of 14. We weren't taught about any financial literacy. We weren't taught about enterprising skills in primary school or middle school. And for me, it was just about, this was a hobby. It was fun. I wanted to learn about business, and there was no better way of teaching business, of learning business myself than teaching it. So we got started teaching kids how to start their own business. We now teach 60,000 kids across Australia and New Zealand about financial literacy and entrepreneurship. And the goal is 100,000 by 2025. So we've got a long way to go, but we're having lots of fun teaching some pretty amazing kids, especially some incredibly disadvantaged kids, about some really vital life skills.
And how do you actually go into the schools? Is it an invitation, and you've gone in and pitched to, say, the principal or something, and then they've adopted your program? How do you actually start it off in a school?
Sure. So the program's in 2 parts. We've got an in-person program where we do most of that's with government, so federal government and state government across the country. So going down into classrooms, focusing on communities or schools with high youth unemployment. So frequently Outback Queensland, Cape York Queensland are huge unemployment regions. They're unemployment hotspots across the country. And for us, it's really using entrepreneurship, not just for the sake of entrepreneurship and starting a business, but really using entrepreneurship as a way of introducing young people to self-employment. Obviously, the unemployment levels have and will continue to be incredibly high, and we kind of want to use self-employment as a viable career pathway for a lot of these disadvantaged kids, and that's what we do with government. And then we also do direct to parents and kids themselves. So we run business camp, which in 3 days, the kids have literally 3 days to sell shit. We give them the tools, the resources, the equipment, people, everything these kids need. So kids as young as 6, the opportunity to start their own business. And it's really about teaching kids how to communicate, how to understand numbers. It's just really how to be an adult 101.
It sounds absolutely fantastic, mate. I'm really thrilled, because this actually is something that I'm talking about with some of the other people in this series of videos, that we haven't, in my view, really been doing that in our schools, but you've plunged right into doing it. And is there an emphasis on tech, or is it just business in general? Because I know you had a tech interest from what you just said before.
I did. I got started because I love tech. But I think as we kind of grew as an organization, as the years, I started the organization when I was 14. And at the time, we had, I think, Barack Obama, as well as Malcolm Turnbull, when he was comms minister, was on this coding agenda. If your child doesn't know how to code, they will be left behind. And I think at the time, it was like, I didn't know any better, or the research pointed towards coding as a skill of the future. And well, if the former president and the comms minister was singing this coding is the new global language, then I kind of thought it was important. So we started teaching kids about coding, digital literacy, and computer programming. But it wasn't until maybe 18 months later, we actually had the capacity to conduct a piece of research, and we spoke to big business, medium-sized business, and small business. And in that research piece, we asked them, well, what are the top 10 skills young people will need to thrive in the workforce of the future? And the top 3 skills were all people skills. There were things like communication, creativity. You had things like collaboration and teamwork. Coding came in as 11, coding was 11, and number 12 was the idea of computational thinking. The most important skills were all skills that have been around in your generation, my generation, and my kids' generations. They're innately human skills. A machine will never be able to communicate. A machine will never be able to public speak. A machine will never be able to negotiate. They're skills that are innately human that can only be learned through kind of face-to-face communication or experimentation. You can't teach communication or collaboration or creativity from a textbook. And those are the sort of skills that we decided to focus on rather than skills that would be replicated by machines.
That's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, I really supported the coding agenda. I have a sense that it's sort of been pushed into the background a bit, but hopefully that's not going to be the long-term case. And anyway, I really accept what you're saying about the soft or human skills. But why don't we talk about this? What are the obstacles that you've had to overcome to get the program really going and being adopted in schools, and what barriers are still there that you'd like to see removed? Because that's important for this conversation.
I think I got quite lucky. I started the organisation quite young. I was a school kid. I was the target market of the product or service I was building. So from one sense, I literally built a product I wanted, and people wanted it because I was one of the kids who wanted it. And it happened that the rest of my cohort, my teachers, all understood the importance of people skills. They saw that their kids didn't have financial literacy. They saw their kids couldn't communicate. So I was building a product for people like me, my age, and I had thousands of other customers around me on a daily basis because I still went to school. So I think I got really lucky in the infancy of the organization. I never had to do market research. I never had to, I never had to confirm that this was really a problem and the solution was required because I was the problem. And I guess the solution came from me. So I got lucky, I think, from the very start. In terms of the roadblocks, certainly, I think when you're young, you might not have as much life experience. You don't see why you shouldn't do something. So in one sense, I was quite lucky. I didn't see why I shouldn't have done it, so I went for the impossible. But in turn, you don't have as much life experience. So when you fail, you're failing a lot lower than the average human being. I think purely it was life experience. I didn't have any business experience. I didn't know how to do basic accounting. Keeping an accounting log was something that was quite new to me. Keeping basic records was a very foreign concept from what you learn at the age of 14. My thing was you sell a product for more than it cost you and you'll be successful. But there was obviously a lot of other things that go with that. So for me, it was purely a matter of knowledge. I didn't get taught basic human skills. Every single kid is going to need to learn about tax. Every single kid is going to learn about mortgages and interest. And they're things I have to learn outside of the classroom that I probably should have been taught in the classroom.
Well, look, why don't we now sort of just then take it to a different sort of perspective on this whole thing, now that we've, I guess, got our viewers understanding where you've been and what you've been trying to achieve. What do you think going forward? What are some of the big things we could be doing nationally to try and come out of this crisis, to really equip people and to, as much as possible, zoom out of this as opposed to sort of struggle for many years? Not that I want to be negative about it, yeah.
As you said at the start, I'm a massive advocate for education, investing huge amounts of money in the right education. In Queensland, our problem historically has been unemployment, and in particular youth unemployment over the last 10 years. Finally, over the last 6 months, we've finally got ourselves out of our outback Queensland youth unemployment hole. We sat at 67.1% youth unemployment, which to me is just such an insane figure that somewhere in Queensland, we have thousands, tens of thousands of kids. Most of them don't have work, and even if they wanted work, there wouldn't be an opportunity for them to engage in any meaningful work. That's 67.1% of youth unemployment levels coming back. This COVID, we've got business confidence at an all-time low. The kids aren't in school, therefore they're not learning any new skills. As soon as we get out of this mess, quite literally in terms of kids staying home in a lockdown state, our kids are going to have no work to go into, and they have no prospect of any work over the next 5 to 10 years. We finally dealt with youth unemployment crisis over the last 6 months, but we're going to have the exact same problem again. And to me, that is the problem, because these kids want meaningful work. They've got the capacity to contribute to our Australian economy. We know some of the most amazing mining businesses have come out of regional communities of our country. And the fact you've got most of these kids with no prospect of any work opportunity for the foreseeable future is concerning. So I think, to me, giving kids in regional communities an outlet to express themselves in the form of meaningful work has to be a focus for both state and federal. And that's not just Queensland. Northern Territory, South Australia, in addition to Queensland, always has huge youth unemployment after any crisis.
So, but what then are some of the things that we can actually be doing? What sort of training, what sort of regulation, what sort of framework can we or should we be putting in place to actually deal with what you've just said?
In 2003, Peter Hartz in Germany introduced made a set of reforms and a set of guidelines to boost and kind of slow down and solve the youth unemployment crisis. Obviously, when you remove incentives not to work and you put incentives to work, you solve youth unemployment. So that's not just feeding $750 a week to people who might not necessarily have a job, but that's incentivizing people in communities, in some extremely regional communities, to take low-paid work. That could be in the form of self-employment, having a go. So actually starting a small business to solve a community problem. You might not make $100,000 in your first year, but giving them a platform to start a business, to solve a community problem. It's solving a direct need of a community. It might not be a crazily innovative idea, but it could be practical solutions. For something like Arakoon in Cape York, they've always had a problem of soap. It costs $10 a bar to purchase a bar of soap in Arakoon. And it's not just people who rely on the system in Arakoon. You've still got teachers, you've got police officers who want soap, but not for $10 a bar. That's a market opportunity in Arakoon, which kids have the capacity to solve. So coming up with micro businesses to solve community problems would be an easy first one. The second one has to be manufacturing. I think if you look at places like Japan, you look at China, Germany, Switzerland, the people who are entering manufacturing aren't low-paid, low-skilled workers. They're high-skilled, high-paid workers. They've got the training and education behind them to come up with new innovations in a manufacturing facility. The people who enter manufacturing here in Australia are not necessarily high-paid or high-skilled. They're generally the low-skilled workers who complete basic work that a machine could potentially replace. I think we need to be teaching young people about innovative manufacturing techniques, and the biggest one is lithium. Australia can be a lithium manufacturing superhouse, and we can do that in regional communities. So those would be my top two. Without getting into too much detail, they're quick and easy, and Australia's got the capacity to invest in education and invest into lithium.
Just on regulation, does that sort of come up in your courses? And can you point to things you'd like to see done to make it easier to start a business or to get rid of some of the roadblocks?
Certainly there's a regulatory side, especially when it comes to young people being a director. Now, I don't believe the age for a directorship should move from the age of 18. I think it's fine where it is. And I think some of these new incentives for young people, or for anyone, to the lack of liability, or for directors to start a business, obviously some of these new changes that Scott Morrison's introduced are positive. And obviously if that's kept there for an extended amount of time, it's going to encourage new business and hopefully recover some of the business confidence we've lost over the last 2 months, which has been drastic. I think a lot of it really stems from an education point of view. Young people are not trained to start a business. And I'm not saying every single kid should start a business, but every single kid should be trained to have the skills to start a business. Because whether you start a business or not, whether you work, most of the country is going to be employed by a small business. Right now, over the next 30 years, most of the country will be employed by a small business, 1 in 5 right now. The skills you learn from starting a small business are transferable and timeless. The fact that we leave school without understanding about corporate tax, the fact that we leave school without learning how to manage money, the fact that we leave school without the skills we need to understand an employment agreement is concerning. There's a lot of things we can change from a regulatory point of view, but the core of it is young people are not skilled to even start a business in the first place. And I think if we can have a stronger emphasis on enterprising skills and really they're how to be an adult skills, because every single kid's going to need to learn how to budget. And if they don't, they won't be very successful. And there's skills we probably can teach kids in school and skills we should be teaching in school and stuff we can do instantly. There's stuff we can do right now. It's something we can implement very quickly.
Well, look, I think that's a breath of fresh air thinking like that. And I think that, frankly, in Australia, there isn't enough sort of understanding out there in the community about how a business actually does tick. I mean, I could point to a controversy a couple of years ago where one of the major media outlets sort of confused revenue versus profitability, and were suggesting that it was a spurious debate in the context of corporate tax rates. So that was rather unfortunate, and it does sort of betray. Well, it does sort of indicate a deeper problem with people not understanding things like that. Can we talk though a bit more about education in terms of what the system should be doing, if I can put it that way? I'll throw something at you. For example, there's essentially a bit of a divide between technical and further education, how that's treated, and university education. Going back to the 90s, we used to really, then it was quite bad, we'd say, look, you've got to go to university. And my view is, well, you don't have to go to university. There's lots of great jobs out there that are highly skilled and highly paid, and you need to get training in the TAFE system, if I can put it that way. And yet we do have this different sort of attitude and approach to funding and encouraging people. You got some views on this?
I am an advocate for university. I think there is a time and place. I wouldn't feel comfortable with my doctor operating on me without a university degree. But I think for most people, a lot of the education they will learn from a university degree, they can find a lot cheaply elsewhere and learn it in a far more practical setting. TAFE I graduated from high school 3 years ago. The stigma around TAFE as we grew up was massive. You were considered one of the dumb kids if you went to TAFE.
That's shocking, actually. How terrible, yeah.
And it's a stigma shared by many children in most schools across our country, that if you go to TAFE, you're one of the less brighter students, when really the people who are going to TAFE are learning very practical, very well-paying skills as we enter the workforce of the future. A lot of these emerging trade industries are going to be exceptionally high paid, and a lot of them will probably be paid a lot more than people who finish a 4-year university degree and below 60, 70K on that degree, especially when it comes to that advanced manufacturing sector. I think right now, TAFE Queensland has made has made 4 or 5 short courses free for people to kind of immerse themselves in an advanced trade skills. That's a start. That's a great start that we're actually encouraging young Queenslanders to start a short TAFE course online in emerging industries. That's great, but we need to be doing that all the time. And not just if you land on the link, but every single kid should have I think in school, we've got the time, we've got the capacity, certainly we've got the time, we're only there from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. to actually learn skills from a variety of different industries. Just because you might be a maths person or just because you're an English person, it's a good opportunity. School's an amazing opportunity to learn a new trade or even explore what learning a new trade might look like. So I'm a massive advocate of university for certain industries, but equally TAFE, I think we need to remove the stigma around TAFE, quite bluntly, because there is a stigma. It's incentivizing a lot of people who probably would succeed down a TAFE pathway, not to pursue that pathway just because there is a very negative aura around completing a TAFE course. But equally on the other side, you've got TAFE, you've got university, and then you've got your own private education. Short courses, micro-credentialing. I think that's equally as massive. Learning skills on...
Can we explore the micro-credentialing a bit?
Absolutely. Well, my career's been based around micro-credentialing. I haven't been to university, haven't been to TAFE, but I've done lots and lots of short courses, whether that be through AICD, whether that be through UNSW, whether that be through QUT. I've been doing lots of short courses because I'm learning packaged skills. I do it in 1 or 2 days, and I come away with a new set of knowledge, but haven't had to sit in the classroom for 4 years. I get to learn and then practice that new learning the day after in my workplace. And to me, that is such an exciting pathway for young people, because we know this generation, Generation Z, needs to be excited. This Generation Z needs to be applying knowledge after they learn, not in 4 or 5 years' time at the end of a degree. In order for them to properly learn, they need to be learning the knowledge and then applying it within a short amount of time. And the idea of micro-credentialing, to me, is a massive new area of education that every single kid right now who's sitting at home, they can't go to school, but now's their time. They can actually access Stanford University online courses. They can access University of Washington online courses in areas that they truly are fascinated with. And that's what's going to give our economy a high-skilled workforce, because they're learning new and exciting things in emerging industries.
So in terms of the education providers then, would you like to comment on how they're adapting to this micro-credentialing thing? Do they get it, or are there quite a few out there that don't get it yet? You're obviously getting some of this delivered. You mentioned some organisations like AICD before and UNSW. But overall, how do you see the playing field out there?
Look, university is adapting. They've come up with a huge suite of short courses for the general public. TAFE is doing it. They've done it now. And not only have they just come up with a short course, they've made it free and online. It's accessible to every Queenslander. So there's certain institutions that are doing really well. University and TAFE, brilliant. You've got, say, schooling. You're at school for 12 years. To me, that's an opportunity to kind of engage a lot more young people in micro-credentials during school, whether that be through university or through TAFE, while simultaneously completing your high school diploma. We should be encouraging young people to complete university short courses or TAFE short courses, or through private education, because that's really where they're going to get some very practical, very useful, quick pieces of knowledge that they can take to the workforce instantaneously. And when we do that across a whole generation, that's how you create a high-skilled workforce, not just by saying, well, we've lost this generation, we'll upskill the next generation. It's got to start now. And right now, you've got millions of kids across the country sitting at home, only at school or on their homeschooling for two hours a day. Now's their time, or now's the time for our leaders, or even parents to some extent, to take responsibility and get their kids upskilled in new and emerging industries.
Okay, well, we've talked obviously a heck of a lot about this, about young people, and that's been the focus of your business. But would you like to comment on whether we should be actually targeting the same sort of approach and content and story to people who are in their middle-aged sort of period of their life? Yeah, people in their 40s and 50s. Is that something the government could get behind, to say to these people who might have actually lost their jobs or not sure if they can continue on where they were before? Is that something that we could be have a really strong push to get people interested in, again, learning about business?
And we need to. This is a perfect opportunity for upskilling. Right now, you've got young people, we've got middle-aged workers, we've got some very senior workers who probably don't have the innovative skills to succeed in advanced manufacturing companies or even industries in general. Now's the time for us to be investing in education, especially we're in such a quiet time within the education sector. We're in such a quiet time for people who might be unemployed. This is their time to be upskilled. This is their time to learn new skills, this is their time to kind of grow within themselves. Because as soon as we head to the other side, hopefully we will have this boom, or the hibernation will be over, and we will have a boom in certain sectors, and they will have new skills and new industries for them to hopefully succeed in. So certainly for everyone, I obviously focus into young people because I know the industry, and I know that these industries, especially advanced manufacturing, we can be a superpower in. But certainly for middle-aged workers, it could be doing short courses. It's free, it's easy, it's online, it's accessible to anyone right now. It's really about them taking ownership and saying, yes, do I want to improve or not? If I want to improve, I'm going to start, and I'm going to open the University of Washington and engage in their online short courses. I'm going to engage in Stanford University online courses. They're all free, but it just takes a self-starter to say, yes, I want to learn and I want to be the change that I wish to see in the world. And it's very accessible to them now.
Before we conclude, are there any final things you wanted to say in this sort of topic? Again, how we come out of coronavirus and get the economy going again. Any final points?
Yeah, look, I think purely if my generation is going to be the generation having to pay for this coronavirus debt that China's caused, there are elements of we can learn from China in terms of their rebound. Now, they were the cause of this, but equally, they've kind of laid a bit of a framework to the solution. They've really invested into their manufacturing. They've invested into their education. During the low time when all of their kids were sitting inside during quarantine or lockdown, they were investing in massive education, and they were equally investing in advanced manufacturing at the same time. What's something that we can do as a country to kind of combat and pay back some of this? It has to be investing into our young people and making it easier for people making it easier for entrepreneurs to enter emerging manufacturing industries. And to me, that has to start with lithium, because we manufacture it and then we send it to China.
Well, Taj, thank you so much for being involved in this series of videos. It'll be part of the overall mix, and a very strong message about the young, a very strong message about equipping people to actually think about business and what it entails, and some messages there about some of the reforms we're going to need in education. So I thank you really for your time today.